Flashing light. It's the rain. I think you need a flashing light. People get rowdy when it rains. I think you need a flashing light or something.
We're so excited that it's raining.
I know. Now,
It's like a snowstorm.
it's by Thursday.
Good morning, and welcome to your HART Board Meeting. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we have approval of the minutes, I'd like to read a statement from Commissioner White into the record. Since Commissioner Miller, I've been able to attend the Board of County Commission meeting. I think it's the wrong thing. On June 5th, 2017, I have an unaffordable conflict. Please read the reason of my absence into the record. May I have a minute approval to read? May I have approval to approve the minutes of May 1st, 2017 board meeting?
Second.
Can I motion first?
So moved.
It's a motion by Mr. Bauer, second by Commissioner Kell to approve the May 1st, 2017 board meeting. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion adopted. Public input. We have one for on the agenda item, Sharon Carroll. You have 3 minutes. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Calvert. I live in Lutz, Florida. I know you're having a presentation regarding BRT today, and I would ask that you ensure that you can serve those who need your services first before seeking out costly solutions that could negatively impact those who rely on your services today. And with all due respect to Ms. Egan, at the local delegation meeting last year that I attended, some of you may also have, HART was represented by Ms. Egan, and she was asked by Senator Tom Lee, and I'm paraphrasing, our in innovation and technology rendering fixed guideways almost irrelevant. And I applauded her for saying that we're so far behind, we're ahead. And in the situation that you're in today, I think that's a good thing. You are flexible, you're rubber-wheeled, you can make adjustments to your services and try to ensure that you do serve those customers who do rely on your service. One other thing, I know another agenda item is the Homestead exemption amendment. That will be on the ballot next year. There's a good probability it will pass. But I caution about having a doom and gloom attitude because we're a growing county. There is a reason why the state legislature put this on the ballot, I believe. We're lucky we're growing, not only with new development, but property values as well. And then the last thing I'd like to add is I applaud you for going to zero-based budgeting. Well, that's a good thing. But I would also ask that the board understand fully the financial position before you start handing out the raises. Because I think that was done in this previous year when it seemed to be quite late in the game when the overall financial picture was put before the board. So, thank you.
Thank you. Recognitions, Ms. Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are joined today by, it feels like, the entire Tampa Police Department. This will be a very non-unruly meeting, I'm sure. Today we'd like to do some recognition for Tim Martin, one of our field supervisors, and we're joined at the podium by our Director of Safety, Colin Malloy, and our Director of Human Resources, Brooke Skate. So I will let you two take it over and bring Mr. Martin up for some recognition.
Yes, thank you and good morning. And as Ms. Egan said, we're here with Tim Martin. And Colin and I get the privilege to recognize him for some heroic efforts on April 26th when he assisted the Tampa Police Department. It's employees like him that make my job fun and breathe a sigh of relief often. So thank you, Tim. I'm going to let Colin introduce Tampa PD, and we have a plaque and some recognition for him. We really appreciate you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure as well to publicly recognize Tim Martin for his actions that he took place in helping some of the stakeholders that HART works with One of the stakeholders is the Tampa Police Department. And with that, I'd like to introduce Captain Michael Flynn with the Tampa Police Department.
Thank you. Good morning. Tim, on behalf of Chief Eric Ward of the Tampa Police Department, we'd like to say thank you. Your actions exemplifies our mission statement, which is to reduce crime and enhance quality of life through a partnership with all citizens. We have 350,000 residents and less than 1,000 cops. People like you doing that keeps us safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
And before we do the full recognition, just to recap, on the date in question, Tim was assigned down to our Marion Transit Center, our downtown hub, and our security guard, who's down there through contract, had been assaulted. And so Tim stayed in radio contact and gave chase, not to chase down the perpetrator, but to make sure that when we had a law enforcement present, that we had our eyes on the person who had assaulted someone on property. You know, finding this perpetrator trying to assault 2 Tampa police officers, and I think everyone here has seen the video. Tim's quick thinking allowed him to get in and subdue the perpetrator, hold him down until more police could show up. So Tim definitely was instrumental not just in catching a bad guy, but ensuring that Tampa police had the ability to do their job safely. And I think you definitely made a difference in a lot of different ways that day. If I ever need someone to put someone in a bear hug, I'm calling you. So thanks for thinking quickly and going above and beyond. Picture.
Stay in the front, Steve.
Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin? Could you come back a minute, please?
Yes, sir.
On behalf of this board, let me thank you for your courageous, quick thinking and doing what you did to help the Tampa Police Department out. This might be part of your responsibilities, but you went above and beyond the call to duty. And I say that because I have a dear place in my heart for Tampa Police Department. My son's a sergeant at the Tampa Police Department. So that means a lot to me that you did that. They put their lives on the line each and every day, and I pray every day that my son comes home, and I know their families do the same thing. So thank you for what you did. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
All right, presentations, budget overview. Let me say that Mr. Seward is not here today. His father passed. And we sent a message to him. He wanted to come in, but I told Ms. Stegan that if he came in, I would have the sheriff remove him. He needs to be with his family. So who's making that presentation this morning? Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen. Lucian Campillo, Director of Enterprise Project Management Office. We just changed names again, so I'm trying to remember what I'm working and everything. I'll be doing the brief this morning along with my colleague, Cindy Zambella. She's a senior budget analyst. She's a smart person, knows the numbers much better than I do. So we'll go ahead and I'll just introduce, and then I'll let her get on with it. Okay, so you've seen this slide a couple times, but I just wanted to highlight a couple things. The budgetary pressures we are facing for FY 2018, that decrease in fund balance since 2014 of $10.4 million. That 3-year total impact of wages, and Cindy will go a little bit more into the details for the FY 18 look. The decline in ridership that continues nationwide. And finally, the continued increases in personnel fringes and liability costs. These pressures are, as we're looking into the future, we're taking them into account as we're building our budget to figure out how we're going to serve our community. Okay, and with that being said, quick introduction. Like I said, Cindy, my colleague, will go ahead and take over with the smart information I'm sure you're looking for.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Directors. Cindy Zambella, Manager of Budget and Grants for HART. So as Lucian alluded to, we do have some budgetary constraints. I know that Jeff has presented those to you over the past few months, so it's no surprise that we are still looking at a gap in our current budget for 18. Before you is a snapshot of our revenues as they are projected for FY 18. You can see that pass and fare revenues are once again down based on a declining ridership. We have received our preliminary property evaluations, and we do know that we are projecting an 8.29% increase in our ad valorem. But it is the will of the board to drop that increase into our fund balance to begin to maintain and increase our piggy bank. You can also see that grants are being held very flat, if not declining slightly. And any increase that we may have in our 5307, which is our formula grants, we will be redirecting to our capital program, as we are going to be using all of our ad valorem in our operating budget. So our operating expenses have continually increased as a cost of doing business the way it currently exists. Our largest expenses and increases for FY18 are personnel services, both in our salary line and our fringe line. You can see that that equates to almost an $8 million increase based on both the collective bargaining increase, a very modest increase for a non-bargaining FTE pool, and fringes are represented at almost $8 million for FY18 based on our health care claims the way they're currently trending. I know Ms. Lee is looking at ways in which to readdress our health care concerns, whether that be to stay self-insured or look for other options and avenues to insure our staff. Some of our other increases to FY18, which is not necessarily a bad thing, one of which is the taxi voucher program that services our paratransit patrons. That has an impact of almost $600,000 in FY18. Obviously, that is defraying some of the costs that we would incur to provide that service with our own fleet, but it has been a very successful program, but there is a cost of doing business. We've been able to decrease our fuel and oil costs based on a shifting of our fleet to CNG. We have over this year and the upcoming year, I believe it's 25 new CNG buses to help with mitigating the cost of oil and fuel. Recently, you approved a marketing contract with Jones Worley, which we hope will then streamline some of our marketing processes, and you can see, again, a positive impact there. And then we continue to scrub our budget for other efficiencies, and I'll talk about that in our next slide here. So we've been telling you all along for the last couple months that we are looking at a fairly large gap in our budget. We have been able to look through internal processes and ZBB work, as you have been told for the last few months that we're going through and starting from the ground up. We are now at a $6.2 million gap. Some of those internal processes are obviously reflected here, but we will continue to bring back additional savings through the internal scrubbing of our administrative expenses. However, what you will find in the next presentation with the TDP and the COA is that true impact to our budget will only come through service changes in the way in which we're currently doing business. And you'll get a better picture of how that's going to be impacted. But I can tell you that in looking at those impacts, we can expect a $2.5 to a $5 million positive impact to our budget if the board decides to go with the recommendations in the TDP and COA analysis. One of the things that this does not include, this $6.2 million deficit, is the use of that $3 million increase to our ad valorem. So if it is the will of the board to continue to drop that money into the bank, we are needing to look for efficiencies that equate to the $6.2 million. Some of the things that it does include are internal processes that we are looking to potentially outsource or absorb and eliminate in terms of some vacancies for FTEs that we can absorb those functions within our current staff. So we'll be coming back to you next month to ask for your adoption of a millage rate. Currently, the millage rate is 0.5, and it has remained flat since 2012. Then we'll be coming back to you with a proposed final budget on August 7th, and then you'll be adopting the budget in 2 public hearings in sometime in September. That's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'll speak up. The $3 million does not include $3 million to ad valorem increase. So the increase in ad valorem, we as a policy had decided to put in fund balance because is it because of our cash flow reserve? We want to keep that at a healthy.
The assumption that staff has been operating under is to build up to get back to not just a 3-month reserve, but again, we have an undifferentiated account. So our reserves and our cash flow is, and it's historically been this way. So looking back through the agency's history, for instance, in fiscal 11, our fund balance was at $17 million. That's led to the situation where we frequently do not have a local match to pursue state or federal programs. And we aren't as flexible as planning for the future as some other entities. So our previous TDPs have been based on 2010 referenda ideas, 2015 for Go Hillsborough, because we've just not had the bank account to be the captains of our fate. And going forward, starting with fiscal 18, being recalibration reset, we haven't really settled on a noun because we've been busy doing the work. If we're going to move forward into a place where not just having 3 months of reserves, but more of a risk reserve, a health reserve, keeping the situation from happening again, we need to put money in the bank. So we proceeded with the assumption that every new dime in revenue from ad valorem would be not something we'd be spending to be putting it in the fund balance.
Okay. So right now, as it stands, are we then going to dip back into reserves for the $6.3 million?
No, ma'am. So the next presentation will be on the 10-year TDP, but also the comprehensive operations analysis. We're still finalizing out the pricing with that. Yep, we're there. And we're also presenting, as part of that presentation, a phased approach for some of the improvements with that COA so we can get to that number. We've done a lot of review of what we can do in our risk management group, our cash app room, our payroll group. We've received a couple of proposals from outside groups on how we can improve our business processes, and we'll continue to look everywhere, but we don't want to create a situation where either we can make it this year and then we're tight squeaking out, because again, 18 is a recalibration ordinance. Calibert's point, we know that we're looking at a probable rollback or a change on our ad valorem, so we want to be prepared for that this year. And not have to put something out this year and then come back and cut in 19, having just put service out there so we can be sustainable from the get-go, and we'll be focusing on service for that.
I noticed in our presentations that were mailed out on Friday that we had a presentation on the homestead exemption. Is this going to be a presentation today, or?
Jeff I believe we have the slides that Jeff had prepared. We are still ballparking what the impact is. We had not received anything official coming in, so is ballparking what the impact would be for fiscal 19, just as a discussion point that the chair had asked us to put on the agenda.
Okay, because I have some slides of my own for that discussion. I don't know if we should save it for later than in the agenda, or where would it'd be a good point. I can do it under new business too. About the homestead exemption and some of the impacts that we might see at the agency. Should I bring that up now? Or
if you'd like us to make copies, it will take a few minutes for us to do that.
Lena has copies.
Okay.
So do you have a presentation, a slide presentation?
Just, yes, related to the homestead exemption. So I just want to make sure when a good point to bring that up would be. Would it be here during the budget discussion? Or?
Well, I'll defer to your judgment. I think you will have a better position to discuss the budget if we go through the TDP and the COA and we see what service will look like, but that's just my recommendation.
Why don't you wait until new business?
I can do that.
In fact, I'll let you go before the millage issue.
Okay.
We'll do it that way?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Tender Auto and Associates recommended service transformation.
And as our team is coming, I would like Justin Bagley. Justin, you're still here, so come on up. This is Justin's penultimate day. So, Justin, how long have you been with HART this time?
Nearly 3 years.
And how long before that?
Almost 5 years.
So we pride ourselves on being a place that folks like to come back to. I don't know that you're coming back this time. Tomorrow is Justin's last day. We are losing him to Denver for the Smart Cities Initiative.
Yes.
So it's a big loss for our staff, but an absolutely fantastic opportunity for Justin. And we're excited and proud that somebody who was here in Tampa gets picked up for such an awesome initiative. So thank you for everything that you've done over the total of the 8 years. And so I have high expectations for your last presentation, so knock it away.
Thank you. And just, I want to say, it's been a real honor and pleasure to come back and work with this group in this organization. I will miss that component of it, which is it feels somewhat like a very small entrepreneurial business environment, which I have worked in before, so I will miss that. But in terms of presentation, I'm only here to hand things off to the experts who are Tyndall Oliver and Associates. About 6 months ago, as I'm sure you've heard some of this overview before, we kicked off the Comprehensive Operational Analysis Transit Development Plan process, which was an effort to look at the way that we provide service and know that we haven't really changed much with our route structure in 30 years, but a lot has changed in the county, a lot has changed with transportation. So it was very timely for us with this TDP update to go back and look at the routes, and we brought in who will probably be considered the regional expert in this field, and they're local. So that was a great benefit. So I'm going to introduce Joel Ray. For those of you who haven't seen his presentation before, we know the planning committee has, and let him go ahead and walk you through the TDP COA process. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Joel Ray with Tyndall Oliver. So I've been here an hour, and I've been told I've got to figure out how to save $6.2 million and do so without my project manager. So no pressure. But without further ado, let's see what I can do to do some damage to this. And we do appreciate everything Justin has done, and we've got other great staff we've been working with, and we know they'll carry us forward. But we are working through a process, and this is kind of an odd duck a bit, because typically what you do is with a comprehensive operational analysis, which is more of an operational efficiency look at your system at the route level and at the network level. Typically it's a snapshot in time to see how the system is performing and what you can do to make it more efficient, and in some cases either save resources or reallocate resources. And that's usually a process that's done maybe a year or so in advance of a TDP. We're doing this in this particular COA in conjunction with the TDP, which is kind of a unique situation because we are going to be able to see those changes to the network and carry them forward in year 1, year 2 of the Transit Development Plan, which is more of a strategic planning document. It's a 10-year look at how the system is going to evolve over time, what you would like to see HART become in the next decade. And so the two are going to be joined together with the COA informing the first year or 2 of the 10-year window, and then we'll talk at the end of this presentation about the needs plan, which is the actual TDP and what we should be doing in the county to improve our transportation services. So with that, I'll just introduce quickly our project team. The project team does have significant national experience. Dan Boyle, I've worked with Dan since the early 90s. He was on the project team that redesigned the entire Houston network. We've worked in South and North Carolina, redesigning several systems. So it's been a pleasure working with him. Jacobs is actually managing the current regional premium transit feasibility study for HART in the county, and so we're on that team, they're on this one, so that we can share resources and make better use of our time between the two projects. And of course we have Valerian helping us with public outreach. And Service Edge Solutions, Rodney and his folks are the ones who designed the T-Best tool that we use for ridership estimation, the transit boardings estimation and simulation tool. So we've got a great team behind us, and I'd like to acknowledge their help. So what we're going to talk about is I'm going to take you through a real quick presentation. Those of you on the committee that I've presented to, you know that we've spent several hours together talking about this information a little more in depth. I'm going to just skirt the surface for the sake of time, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the data, some of the outreach findings, and then talk about the COA and the TDP plan that we're proposing to move forward to public outreach over the next month. So many of you may have seen ridership trends that show ridership spiking up and down, in the case of HART, between 12 and 14 million on a given year. And it just looks like ridership is constantly increasing and decreasing. But if you put it in terms of the growth rate over time, and in this graphic it shows you the growth rate over the last 20 years, you still see that deviation from the norm a little bit with ridership because it is spiky based on what unemployment is doing and gas prices. But you see, compared to Hillsborough County population and the city of Tampa population, HART ridership has been growing at a great clip, 78% over the last 20 years, almost twice that of the Hillsborough County population. These maps are from that TBEST tool, and they're heat maps that show travel time to specific hubs throughout our community. There's 6 hubs that we've selected. They coincide with some of the key HART hub locations in downtown Tampa, the airport, West Shore, and I'll show you 3 additional ones on the other slide, including MacDill and Brandon in the USF area. But what these are is it shows you the intensity of travel times, with the red being where you can get to one of these hubs using HART service within 10 minutes or less. The green, typically 2 hours or longer. So, for example, when you look at the downtown Tampa map, you can see that for the most part, you can get to downtown Tampa from almost anywhere in the network, generally within an hour. And as you look at that core around 275, you can see that you can get there within 10 to 15 minutes. The airport, not so much. You see a lot of that intensity around the West Shore and the airport area, but everywhere else it's more into the 1 and 2 hour range to access. And this includes travel time to get to the original stop that you get on the bus at, transfer time, and the time spent on the bus and accessing your final destination. And then you can see their West Shore Mall, again, hour to 2 hour to get there. There are the next 3, MacDill, USF, which looks a lot like downtown except in the reverse, and then the Brandon area. So what this tells us when we look at these heat maps and kind of put them together is the design of the network, which is primarily grid with some key hubs, is designed primarily for north-south travel to connect the USF and kind of Fletcher area with downtown Tampa very quickly, with not so much good connectivity and frequency in the east-west directions, especially to these other hubs. So we took that into account as we did the operational assessment. Let me just scratch the surface on some of our outreach, because there were 3 phases that were completed. We wanted to be efficient, so we took advantage of the fact that there's been a lot of outreach done over the last few years related to the prior TDP. 2014, HART did a major onboard survey of their patrons. There was also a lot of the Go Hillsborough outreach efforts. So we reviewed all of those to learn from them and get areas of focus that we could bring into phase 2, which was when we actually went out and talked to the public. You could see there a lot of the different activities that were held. To date, we're estimating somewhere in the range of about 10,000 different folks were reached, either with information or getting feedback during the process. And that includes online surveys and email blasts and that sort of thing. And then in phase 3, we're going to go back, and I mentioned in the next month, between mid-June and mid-July, at the pleasure of this board, we'd like to go back out to the public to show them the results of the COA and the TDP to get their input on the alternatives that we're proposing, as well as guidance on prioritization and where things should fall within the 10-year window. So some of the outreach results that we got back included this particular board. This was something that was taken to all of the outreach events, and people were given dots to vote, if you will. And this, if you guys on the committee remember, I talked about this transit planning continuum, where at one end of the spectrum, we can be equitable and take our resources and spread them all over our service area and put together a route network that's very spread out, not very frequent, maybe not very efficient, but there's coverage everywhere. At the other end of the spectrum, you can have a bus service that's more constrained within a core service area where most of the ridership is occurring, and build the frequency there so that you get more bang for the buck, but the geographic coverage is not quite the same. So we asked the folks, which side of this spectrum do you associate with? And we put it in more simple terms. I want a bus service that comes every 10 to 20 minutes, even if it means that I have to walk more, versus I want bus coverage area to stay the same or even expand, even if I have to deal with 30, 60, or worse minute service. And you see there that most of the folks, almost 80%, agreed with that side of frequency and core enhancement to the service. So again, that helps inform the COA results that I'll show you here shortly. Another board that was used asked them about different alternative modes and activities and what we need to be focused on in the next 10 years. This is to help inform the TDP. And again, through top polling, we found out that more than a quarter of the folks want fast connections between the major hubs and points like USF, the airport, downtown, West Shore, and so forth. A quarter wanted higher frequency service in the key areas, and then also using those ride-hailing services for off-service hours, 22%. And you see 12% there, hyperlink in more areas. So we're starting to see some of the benefit of the hyperlink, and that's going to be an important service for us when we get to the TDP proposed services. So now let's talk COA. Now we had to go in with some guiding principles. After analyzing the network and looking at the results of the outreach, we knew that we had some work to do in improving travel times. There's been some press in the paper about longer trips, especially from the USF to downtown to the airport area. We want to try and improve on that. We also wanted to look at directness of travel because you have a lot of routes because of this combination of a grid network with hubs. It doesn't always work out where the grid stays as a grid. And so routes are being bent in out-of-direction travel to try and access different hubs like Net Park or the West Tampa Transfer Center, and that's slowing up some of the connectivity and some of the routes, taking away from their identity. So we're really big on route purpose and route identity and trying to maintain the lines of the grid. We wanted to focus on frequency over coverage based on the guidance we heard from the public, and then also looking at regional connectivity. So that's the quick reveal. You didn't get the full version that showed you all of the intermediate steps to get from the map on the left to the map on the right. But this is, in effect, what we're proposing the 2018 system to look like. So this would be the first year of your TDP. And you can see on the left the existing system, and you can see the route network gets thinned out a bit. We take out some of the redundancy, some of the out-of-direction travel, some of the stair-stepping that some of the routes were doing to get to some of these hubs, give better identity to all of the routes, and then enhance some of those services on some of the key corridors. And this is what it looks like in terms of frequency and the proportion of service hours. You can see right now you have one route that is 15 minutes or better. That's the Metro Rapid on Nebraska Avenue. And what we're proposing with the 2018 changes to have 4 routes, including the 34 on Hillsborough, the 12 on 22nd, and the southern portion of the Route 1 on Florida Avenue, going to 15 minutes or better. And then you can see some of those other changes, including a reduction in the express services, which are your lowest performing routes in the network. And you can see that in the first year, we're actually taking the network, deconstructing it, and cutting it from 41 routes to 34, so that then over the 10-year period, we can build it back. And I'll show you that at the end of the presentation, so that you don't think that we're just going to lose service. Now, you're probably asking yourselves at this point, because of the prior presentation, what does this save us? I'll save you the time of asking the question, and I'll talk a little bit about that, because I figured it would come up. Right now, as was said in the prior presentation, the estimate is somewhere between $2.5 to $3 million and $5 million. We're fine-tuning that because we're using the current remix tool that HART has available, and that tool is not as specific as we need for costing purposes. We need to go and schedule all of these changes to make sure we're getting at the correct number of hours. And we're going through that process right now, and what we're estimating is somewhere between that 3 to 5 million is the net savings that we can have. What that means is we've cut a lot of service. And in fact, something I did not tell the other committee, we have estimated what our cuts total. We think it's somewhere around $7 million in savings. But we've reallocated some of those savings back into some of the services with some new limited express shown on the map. For example, the Hillsborough Avenue Route 34 going from 30 minutes to 15 minute service, which is about a $1.4 million cost by itself, because that requires a lot of buses. And so that's where we get to that $3 to $5 million savings. It's a net savings. So if you didn't implement any of the new improvements, we think we're going to be somewhere on that $6 to $7 million, which could potentially take care of the situation. So I wanted to make you aware of that, and there'll be subsequent discussion on that. But for our purposes, again, we're trying to do the analysis of the COA and the TDP in a vacuum from a budget standpoint initially. We'll bring fiscal reality into it towards the end. But we wanted to make sure we're doing things for the right reasons and not just solely because we're trying to save resources. Follow? All right. So what you see here in terms of service hours, on the left, the existing routes, about 81% of your service hours are on those 20 routes. And what we're going to do is we're going to increase the number of service hours in the more frequent areas to about 86% of your service hours would be on those top 22 routes. So again, even though we're cutting routes, we're improving service and the amount of service that's available in terms of frequency. So now let's change gears. That's, again, the operational assessment of the network where you get those savings. Now here's the part where we actually do the visioning and figure out, now what should HART become over the next 10 years? And there's a lot more that goes into it than just a couple of slides, but for sake of time, I just wanted to get to the final reveal to show you what we're proposing, and then we can talk a little bit about cost, but we're still working on that. So in the 2027 timeframe, this is what we expect the network to look like if we have funding to support all of these needs. Higher frequency to generate more ridership in the core network. Outside of the core, we're going to use alternatives like that Hyperlink, Flex, ride-hailing services to provide connectivity, first mile, last mile, to that core network. Enhanced connectivity between your major hub areas like USF and downtown and the Brandon area and so forth. Regional connectivity, including going out to Pinellas, out to Lakeland, up to Pasco. Looking at autonomous vehicles to capitalize on the pilot that's going to be occurring in the Marion Transitway. Some ferry boat service or waterborne transportation service. And then making that grid more quick, more frequent, so that people can get through the network more quickly, even if they have to transfer several times. So now what does that look like? Well, here's the 2027 network, and I'll take you through step by step the different colors. First, as shown by the red routing, this is our core network. You see it's primarily in the center portion of your service area. These are the core corridors. These would be 15-minute service or better. Then building on that, we would do some 20-minute service. These are the peak hour express and some limited stop express, including the airporter operating all day. Those are shown by that yellow color lines. In the blue, we have your basic network. This is all 30-minute now, whereas now your base network is more 60-minute. We switch it to a 30-minute network and provide connectivity between USF downtown and the airport and West Shore areas. We still have 60-minute service, but in the farther outreaches of our service area, in the lower density areas, and also in our regional connectivity, that would be the 60-minute service. And you can see there service off I-4 to Plant City and beyond to Lakeland, up into Pasco and over to Clearwater. And then finally, the circles that are pink in color would be your Flex and Hyperlink catchment areas to bring folks to those routes for additional connectivity. And then you see the ferry service coming in, McDill, downtown, St. Pete, South County. And then, again, expanding on that pilot with the AV service. So this is what we would propose the needs plan to look like for the 2027 TDP. Obviously, the needs plan, much like if you were familiar with the long-range transportation planning efforts, you have a needs plan that's not cost-constrained, and then you have a cost-feasible version. We work on the cost-feasible based on the priorities we get from the public and from this group, but this is what the ultimate needs plan would look like. The cost currently to operate your service is generally around $68 million a year operating expense. In today's dollars, this network to operate would be on the order of about $108 million, so just over 50% increase in operating costs to run everything as we have proposed here. So that gives you a sense of, $680 million over 10 years in today's dollars versus $1.1 billion in operating cost over the 10 years of the plan. Those are rough estimates. We're still working on, the implementation plan. That'll come next with the financial plan, so we'll have more firm numbers when we come back in August for you to adopt the program. So what's this going to look like in terms of that prior graphic? You see here, bottom line, You go from 22 routes in 2018 that are 30-minute or better to 29 routes, so much more frequent service, especially in that core. And you see that we're now growing the system back from the 34 routes that we proposed in 2018 to the 49. So again, it's a short-term reduction in service to get things operating right and then put it back in a logical fashion to grow the system. So what's next? Obviously, we're going to finalize the needs plan based on guidance from the board, and then we'll take it back out to the public, proposing to go out between mid-June, mid-July to get their input, rework the plan based on the input we receive, develop the implementation financial plans, and bring it back in the August timeframe for this board to adopt in time for the September 1st deadline that is a requirement of the FDOT rule. With that, I can open it up for questions, and thank you for your attention.
Any questions? No questions. Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I just want to say it was I think when you look at, again, how underfunded we are and our needs being so great, the massive size of our county, 3 times the physical size of, for instance, Pinellas, where they are getting $66 per capita and we're getting $55, and our service just being so stretched to the edges. I can appreciate that it's a really difficult challenge to try to look at how we can serve more people, but I think that should be our goal. And I can appreciate all the difficult circumstances. I am very happy to see the direction, more focus on the grid, more focus on frequent service. In terms of transit, I firmly believe, as many do, that frequency is more important, is a proxy really for speed. And so that you could have buses come frequently but stop a lot to pick up a lot of people and achieve the same results. I'm glad to see in the initial terms the express our express buses are by far our poorest performing buses, and to see what we can do to serve those limited number of people in other ways, I think for now is good. I do have concerns about several of the proposals in here, and some that are happening on some of our very top, most important routes. And one of those is route number 1, Florida Avenue. I know that we have proposed to go 15 minutes south of Hillsborough and through downtown, and we're now getting quite a bit of service in downtown in terms of circulators, the downtowner, the possible streetcar expansion, all that. And I think that's less significant for us to be getting a bus down there all the time in a circulating pattern of any sort. I'm deeply concerned about the loss of north of Hillsborough Avenue all the way to USF, that instead of the 20 minutes, which I think is extraordinarily important, and it's one of our top routes, and that's one of the reasons it is. And I've looked at the ridership north of Hillsborough up to USF. It's part of the unincorporated area that I represent, and I would I would rather sacrifice 15-minute service south of Hillsborough Avenue and keep the entire route at 20 minutes. I think that's extremely important in terms of keeping our ridership on that route, serving people, and doing what we can there. In the other areas, I'm just also, when I see how stretched, utterly thin we are, and how difficult it is for us to provide frequency of service, and again, Hillsborough Avenue, I applaud hugely. I think we definitely needed an east-west route with great frequency. We needed that very, very badly for our grid. We didn't have it. But some of the choices, like the adding in first express buses going from USF to the airport, that I really don't understand, because our express buses have been such poor performers, and it seems to me our money in the short run, limited dollars till we get to a much higher level of service and investment in our bus service. That should be something that we would be putting in 20-minute service for routes before we would put into express service that isn't at grade and doesn't have the kind of stops and increasing the ridership and service that we would desire. So I'm looking at it as a whole. I appreciate many of the much of what has been done, but I don't know. Could you speak a little bit to that? Because we took out the express service because it's not performing well, and then there's a suggestion to bring it back.
Joel, I'll jump in there. Commissioner Kemp, thank you for the observations. We've got some slides. I'm not certain if Joel's doing them, Marco, et cetera. But given that the improvements called for in the TDP and the budget gap don't line up, we had worked with our consultants to say which of the improvements would be the last to phase in, and the last would be that USF to downtown to the airport. So we have heard your concerns on that. They echoed ours as well. Where should we concentrate on investing if we can't make the whole thing happen? I believe also Joel can answer this one better, that part of the overhaul of service was to streamline and clean up what was going on in the downtown area. So many of the routes which meander through downtown would be going much more directly to MTC. So as you're saying, those resources would be invested in service, not in the CBD. There are a lot of options downtown. We did hear late Friday that the governor did veto the hyperlink request. So we will not be looking to introduce that in downtown, but our staff has been working with the downtown partnership on who should have ownership for the downtowner going forward and how does all of this rationalize and make sense. But I do believe that the routing through downtown was something that we had looked at to streamline, to clean up and put those resources elsewhere.
That is correct. And the one thing I'll mention that you did not, Catherine, is the Route 1 in the TDP, as I said, we stripped things down to then build it back up over the course of the tenure of the TDP. Route 1 does go to all 15-minute service, both north and south of Hillsborough. So it is back in 15-minute or improving from the 20. Just in 2018, we had proposed the 30 in the north side and the 15-minute.
Well, I would hope that we would just keep it at the 20 minutes and wait until we can go to 15 minutes. I think it would be a real loss of one of our key routes, and that is something I think that we shouldn't be looking at. Also, and I know we talked about this at our TMA MPO meeting last Friday, and I know Commissioner Merman at that point pointed it out. I really feel as though regional expressway service, those kinds of routes are ones that we should look to our state legislature or FDOT to fund, rather than have them funded on a local level. That we should be really looking at building our local service, because obviously both are desperately underfunded, really critically underfunded, but we shouldn't be shifting resources to unsuccessful routes and emphasizing those. I really think our first priority should be to look at all our top 10 routes and go for 20-minute service before we even think about anything else. And I know that that's kind of, I just can't see on here. The other concern I have is on Florida Avenue on Route 2, which again is one of our key routes. And I know we're talking about combining Metro Rapid and our regular service, which I think is a good thing, our Metro Not So Rapid as it's been called. And I think we do need to combine those. It's a much more efficient use. And I know we're going to 12 to 15 minutes, which I'm very happy about. I do have concerns about the fact that apparently we're taking the stops from Metro Rapid, as I read, and adding 2 more so that overall we'd be reducing the number of stops, and that's not necessarily the worst thing we can do. I understand that, but I had some concerns because I was looking online, and this is something I think we need to deal with on our online mapping, but we don't list our stops online, and there's no way to really see what's being done with that when I try to figure out what stops are going to be there. The other thing I think we need to deal with our maps online, because we don't put any of our stops online, which I was surprised at when I was looking it through this weekend.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Murray, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say on behalf of the committee, we poured through this for a couple hours and really chopped and dissected everything. It was a great meeting, a great discussion that we had. I know a lot of the members of this board were at that meeting. I do want to thank you for doing this work. I said you couldn't have slept for 6 months. There is so much work that has gone into this. And we did achieve goals here. Number one, you built a terrific foundation to build on for the next 10 years, especially if we continue to have ad valorem growth. Commissioner Kemp brought up a point that I feel very strongly about. Local ad valorem dollars need to go to local service, and was very strong in my opinions at the TMA meeting about that DOT needs to fund our regional service, just bottom line, state and federal dollars. And so I hope that we can work those partnerships. But I'm very happy with the plan. I think you're building in flexibility to it. I know we talked about that a lot, because still South County, Northwest and Southeast and Southwest County really aren't showing too much in the way of really good service for people. I think we're going to have to work hard to really try and connect all those people that are moving into South County. I'm talking Fish Hawk, East and South. We got to figure out a really strong way to feed them into a hub that can really help them get good, strong ridership. That's what's going to help our arguments for transit in the future. We've got to build this ridership, and I think that's another point that is achieved by this, that we are building strong ridership through concentrating on our top 10 routes. It's not that we're dropping, but we're going to use innovation and technology for those lower ridership routes. And with that, I mean, we're going to be very successful moving forward. I think the committee really blessed this as a whole. We had quite a bit of discussion on it, but please take a lot of your workshops and your whatever. I guess you're going to the public. I hope you'll go into South County and up near West Chase, where there's a lot of apartments, a lot of growth in the West Chase area. So thank you again very much.
We'll share the meeting schedule with this week's weekly, Commissioner. I think we have, I want to say, at least 10 to 15 meetings already scheduled for June and July. And our anticipation would be a public hearing late July, so when we come to you in August, you will have the benefit of a board meeting after public hearing. We can continue to do outreach for that. We do want to make sure that we can bring you a TDP that's tied to a budget for an October implementation, but we'll get that meeting schedule out for you.
So can we have that? I mean, we can put that on the county website too.
She's going to get it to us set by Friday.
And so if you could guess the list. And
yes, ma'am.
Just a reminder, 350,000 people live in the city, 4 times out in the county. So we gotta really balance that and make sure that we're giving something to everybody that's paying taxes here in Hillsborough. Thanks.
Mr. Jacob, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too think that this is a really honest and comprehensive look at the reality of what we're facing, and that's what's really important. And we are going to have to make some hard decisions on certain things in order to stay the course on this and keep our strategy in place to move forward and get to our ultimate goal. My question is the information you're giving us really focuses on the time, in other words, the 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And when we change a route from 30 minutes to 20 minutes or 15 minutes, what does that do to the capacity of the route? And do we have those numbers? In other words, is the capacity of the route commensurate with the demand on that route within that time frame we're doing it? So, because I think that's a number that our constituents and our riders would be interested in, to make sure that when we change a route, we're actually really responding to the demand within that perfect area at those time frames. And so I'd be curious if that's something you all have looked at, because I think you mentioned going on certain routes you have to add buses to get
Correct.
to this. What does that do per hour, the capacity of that route in order to service that particular constituency? I think would be really important information to be able to share, because I think it gives another level of understanding of why we're doing this.
And I apologize, because obviously for the sake of time, it's really difficult to get into all the details of everything we've done. You know, when you don't sleep for 6 months, you can get a lot of stuff done. But the analysis that the COA report will document will have a lot of that information, because one of the things we have to understand is a route worthy for, and let's talk about the 34, the Hillsborough Avenue. You know, is that corridor ready for 15-minute service? And the only way to look at that is the demand, and are the buses running where they're primarily full, have some standing room during periods of time. So if you're going to go from 30-minute service to 15, you're in effect putting in twice as many buses. So you're doubling the capacity. So that, for Hillsborough, makes sense given the demand that's on that corridor. So those are some of the things that we do look at. Now, in some cases, we don't, like in the case of Florida, we see a greater amount of need in the southern portion going into and out of downtown than in the northern portion, which is why the initial recommendation was to have that kind of bifurcated frequency on it, but then taking it to 15-minute, because our hope and expectation is that as this grid improves and you have better connectivity, some of these routes are going to get greater demand on them, greater use. So yes, we need to consider capacity to make sure that we are covering the current demand and then making a play for what demand could occur in the future that is going to be brought on by this enhanced network.
Councilman Suarez, recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. When you've done the TDP in the past, you probably haven't done this, but did you look at how technology can change what our service is going to look like in terms of, you've got it out to, I think 2027. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that are happening now that probably are not included as to what we do. I think one of the things that we try and do is to make sure that technologically we're connected better, and that we're able to know and get those numbers better. And if I'm not mistaken, your boss is really into demographics, if I recall correctly. A little bit. Yeah, he talks about it endlessly, no matter when I see him. So, when you're looking at one of your slides mentioned the 2027 network, and it says on here about outside the core in terms of what we do in terms of traditional bus, but it says quickly connected grid and super stops. The only way we're going to get that is by investment into more technology to make it easier for people to understand where buses are at any one point, first of all. Mm-hmm. But second of all, any other services that we might be able to provide. And I know that there are other cities that are providing this type of service where they're at hotels or other places where people are traveling to. They will have the board and tell you exactly what all the services are being offered at one point. And I've mentioned this before in at one of these meetings, that it's something that we might want to look at. So those savings that we get from the change to the TDP, do we go into just providing the additional services to reduce time, or do we put it into technology in order for the future for us to increase routes, increase areas in which we have, for better terminology, you'll probably know it, surge service, so that when we need something to provide extra service, so it's less than 15 minutes or 15 minutes or less than 20 or less than 30, that we have that technology available. Because I don't think we're looking at it from that standpoint. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is that something that I know TDPs are a little bit different because this is not necessarily part of it, mm-hmm. but is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Thank you. No, listen. Anytime you can get a one-word answer on that long question, that's pretty damn good. So
I would say I want to take up all your time, but yes, as a part of a TDP, we do look at the capital side because there are technological advances that occur. The one that I thought you were going towards was AV, and that's one, I've heard a recent quote about by 2035 no one will be driving their car, it will all be automated.
Right.
I'm not sure of that. So by 2027 it's kind of hard to figure out, are we going to have operators in the buses or the buses going to be driving themselves? We don't know, so we assume not.
There's a reason why I didn't go to AV, because I think that we have a lot more to do before we get to AV. And
absolutely.
the FDOT is going to do, they put I think $200 and $300 million into a training facility for AV. That money could have been very well spent here. But you know what? That's their decision. And AV, in their mind, is something that they want to invest in. That's perfectly fine. But for me, I think that we need to look at simpler ways that we can do technological advances. Our One Bus Away has been a success, but it's not connected to what some of the parking that we have. So we don't have smart parking to connect to those other types of technological advances. And so then we don't have any way to know whether or not people are coming from a particular section at any one time based on times of the day, different events, all kinds of other aspects. So we're not using the ability that we have now to have technology to actually help us come up with better routes.
But if our friends at the city want to do that,
what's that?
If our friends at the city want to help us tie to their venues,
Well, I know we
would
applied
be great.
for the Smart Cities Challenge, which now is no longer around. So we're not going to get any money from the federal government to do this type of stuff. So we have to be smarter in terms of what we do, both in terms of our local dollars from the county and from the city, so that we can invest in some of these things. So if we're saving money, maybe we ought to look at reinvesting in the technology available. And this is something that's not part of the TDP because it's not your responsibility, but it's our responsibility, I think, is to get those partnerships, whether it's public or from other private entities that might want to help us find those solutions. And we haven't done enough of that because we are essentially still throwing water out of the boat, okay? And sometimes we forget that, you know what, we could probably trim the sails and actually go faster. We've got to be careful about what we do. Because we're still taking on water, but nonetheless, we have to start thinking in the future, which is the pump is working, we're getting the water out, we're going to repair the boat, and we're going to go a little bit quicker. So we need to think about that as the next step. So I wasn't sure what else you put on there because the potential savings should be plowed back into some of these technological advances that are available to us, and especially from other cities. We see them all the time.
We're working on the capital part of the plan because there is a capital part. I purposely stayed away from it because we're not there yet to talk more directly about it. But when we come back in August, we can certainly share some of that. And so technology on the service side, we've presented some of the things, especially enhancement of the hyperlink and going with the flex services. And there's things you could do there from a mobility management perspective and how you dispatch and so forth. So those are things we'll think about. The one thing I'll mention, One Bus Away is a great app, and there are now companies that are going beyond that where people can just look to see what time the bus is going to be at their stop, where they could actually go online and look at the entire map and see where all the buses on every route are at any given time in the network. I just worked with Dan Boyle and Clemson, and they have a map, and it's a very small network, 7 routes, and they have an online map. So that's something that can be done. And if you're familiar with the company AirSage, they use cellular data to determine where people are coming from and going to. My understanding is that through the use of the One Bus Away app, there is the potential for doing the same thing with rider data. Now, you've got to cross the privacy boundary to figure that out, but my understanding is you could use their cell phones to track the riders from their origin all the way to the destination and the route they used.
Yeah,
and that would be incredible for route planning.
I think that's something that if they opt in to do something like that, and maybe even as a pilot project, over a 30, 60, 90-day period, and say if you are riding our bus, you're a regular bus rider, if you want to opt into this, we want to know where you're actually going so that we can actually know where the buses are necessary. That's what we need to start talking about and start doing. But anyway, that goes a little far.
Great discussion, sure.
But thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Before I call on Mr. Roach, let's pray for our country and the world. There's been a mass shooting in Orlando for some facilities. They're just breaking the news now, so just keep people in prayer. Mr. Roach, recognized.
Wow, sorry to hear that. I just want to say that I also am favorable about the plan that you're presenting, and it was a very good workshop that we had. And but I also, at the same time, I appreciate Commissioner Kemp's comments about we need to be cognizant of who our existing riders are and make sure that that we keep them in mind. But I'm also looking at the fact that this is something that's going to be implemented over the next several years, and we will be able to kind of get some feedback as we implement and make changes on the fly. So we're not like setting this in stone for 10 years. So I think we'll be okay with that. question that I have on your map here, and I was going to go into the direction of innovation, and Councilman Suarez kind of you're along the same lines of thinking actually here. On your map, you have park and rides. Are those existing park and rides, or is that part of the improvement?
Those
plan?
were existing park and rides, and
Okay.
so if the infrastructure is there, if we can make use of them to create some of those additional hubs in the outskirts, but I don't know that they would all be necessary.
Okay.
And let's clarify, when we say park and ride, in many cases, this is a use agreement for excess parking. The concept of a park and ride with like a 300-space facility that's dedicated, we don't have anything like this. This is often a rec center parking lot or a church parking lot.
Correct.
Or something similar.
Okay. The reason I ask is, one of the questions I think I had asked you before was about innovation and how that might impact what we do in our 10-year outlook. And just to give you an example of how fast the pace of technology is going, since last month when we talked, in our news clips, I think it was Thursday or Friday, there was an article about Waze, the Google app that kind of has our data, and they are launching, I believe it's Wednesday, June 6th, a carpool app in the state of California. They've been piloting it in Northern California. This is something, I've been talking about a paradigm shift in transportation, and I think we're going to see this really kind of be a disruptor in the whole transportation industry as this goes forward. And I think one way that we can help foster this meets the goal of trying to reduce the number of cars on the road if people are carpooling. So I think from our agency's perspective, and it gets people faster or more conveniently to where they need to go. So in order to facilitate that, I would love to embrace this and make an invitation to ways to maybe if they want to pilot in Florida to try here in Hillsborough County. So I don't know what this is a little off subject, so I'm just going to just throw it out here and maybe we can have this as a further discussion. What our policies are on our park and rides. Because I think if people have a safe place where they can meet somebody, kind of a public place where they can leave their car and they know it's safe, then we might be able to help foster this innovation that really would help people get around. And as a taxpayer, there's really not a whole lot that we need to do as a governmental agency. So anyhow, that's kind of my thought, because I always think back to Senator Brandis when he came here last June and he talked about the Pony Express and how there was a disruption in the whole communication with the telegraph. So, we just don't want to have a focus on buying more ponies when the telegraph is coming right behind us and, we're going to be out of business. So I've always look at innovation and I think something like this is around the corner and just something that we ought to help foster if possible.
I just I want to add to that because I've heard a couple items brought up. And the good news is, and I'll start with the Waze proposal, in the original City of Tampa Smart Tampa proposal was called, they had actually reached out to Waze and had a partnership in that proposal to do exactly what's being launched now in California. It's just unfortunate the Smart Cities proposal, there was only one award and there were 50 cities, so they chose California to launch it, but I'm sure if it's going to go anywhere else soon, you're going to see it here. And then also the mobility on demand, I think Director Suarez was talking about, is something, I don't want to speak too much to it till the proposal goes out, but it's definitely in the minds of your staff, and it's being worked on and developed here, built on one bus away. So thank goodness that this is kind of some of the discussion and some of the things that are being let out in these grant opportunities that the city and Hillsborough County would benefit from, as well as HART.
Suggesting we're still as progressive as Denver.
Councilman Donahue, you recognize.
I have a question about an increase of opportunities. I recently chaired an event, and I was amazed at how many people rode to and from the event using Uber. And where these are people who had driven their cars in the past, or in some cases even their golf carts. I do live in a golf cart community. And they chose to take Uber. My question is, is there any increase here for weekend or event opportunities for people to use our transit system, Gasparilla, Super Bowl, these things that we know are coming? Because right now, I know we have a different system for the weekends than we do, and this is just not even looking at big events. So is that built in anywhere into the formula?
For the TDP, which would be where it would be included, we could certainly look at special events. We have not specifically looked at changing the network or changing operating policy or hours of service for things like Gasparilla. For other events, that's something that we can talk to staff about. As far as Uber, Lyft, the transportation network companies, we do make accommodation for them in the plan to enhance that relationship and make them part of that arsenal of other alternative services that you can use to get people in the outskirts to the core network, or at least one of the routes that lead to the core network. So we do accommodate that Uber, Lyft model, but not necessarily the special events.
Well, I didn't mean necessarily to give an ad for Uber or Lyft. I didn't know if we were going to build any new opportunities into our offerings.
Well, my understanding is Hyperlink would increase based on, which is a very similar concept, but I'll let Marco talk about that.
And Councilwoman Donahue, one of the things that we are, very much aware of is the opportunity to kind of give people a good first impression of public transit when they can ride HART to or from an event. And so over the years, Gasparilla has been an area where we have just done better and better every year with the quality of the service that we put out, the use of the streetcar to connect from Ybor into the event in downtown, but also the bus bridge that we put out to shuttle people to and from that event. And so as these big events come to Tampa, you better believe that HART is at the table and a great solution and partner to help move people to and from these event locations, and importantly, give people a first impression of public transit in this system and get them wanting to come back for more.
Okay. And one note on that, we part of the TDP has been moving transit away from the West Tampa Transfer Center. That's on Himes, which is always closed during events. And there we go. And the fallback location is on St. Isabel behind the MLK Hospital. St. Joe's on MLK. Part of the TDP overhaul was to move more routes out of West Tampa. We could potentially have a location or a hub at the HCC campus that would not shut down during special events. So then we have the ability that if we're running insert trips or additional service, we can actually get to the event. And we see a different use for folks going to the events at Raymond James than we do for Gasparilla or circulator events. For Gasparilla, you're not driving home after your 20-minute streetcar ride. So we're circulating you from one place to another. And a short trip is not a bad idea for a football game or something. Folks are in a position where they often just want to get back to their car. They're taking different trips. So we are mindful on the market. But I will say Marco's team has been doing a lot of review on this and looking at where our community partnerships, what can we do under restrictions on charter service. So look for us to continue being in that market. And we're not waiting till 2021, but expect to see a lot more HART presence at a Super Bowl in the future.
Okay. And then this last comment is probably not politically correct, but at what point do we say, if you live there, we can't get you here? Because looking at this map, this map is insane how far away we have hubs, large hubs, and you brought it up yourself, Commissioner Merman, about, Fish Hawk, and name some other areas that we know that are just bursting at the seams and new homes are going in every day. At what point do we put our foot down and say, okay, we can't get you here. You chose poorly. You should have picked closer to your job or whatever. I know, it's again, this is probably sticking in my head. There'll be builders and developers all over the place coming after me. But do we have a right to say, look, we can only go so far? What helps us do our job? This map really points it out how far away people live. No one needs to comment if you don't want to. You don't need to jump into this deep pool that I'm in.
I'm not running again, so I can say it. The rest of them might. Eventually, yes. We're going to have to say, we can't serve every nook and cranny of this county. Wish we could, but finances do not allow that to happen. So eventually, we're going to have to tell folks, regardless of where they live, in South County, East County, North County, whatever the case may be, because of the feasibility of what we have to adhere to, just can't get to you. I think I saw Commissioner Kemp next. Let's we have a long agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been on this a long time. So let's start bringing some format. Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I concur with your good points made. We really do have to think about, and I think that's part of the direction of this, because the express buses here are, when we do these long routes, are actually not even very efficient, and that's part of what we're looking at here, and then increasing frequency on our heaviest corridors, a shift like that. But I think in order for us to do more substantial service, we cannot do it. We're just we're already almost beyond a crisis point. I just somehow it's not recognized, and there's going to have to be more funding in the community. Just to Director Jarosh, just to point out, T-BARDA has a carpool program, and I believe that this year in the county we will be looking at least I've been trying to move forward with supporting more substantially their carpool program, which is, I believe they're developing an app connected for carpooling, and that is also a local app, Pick My Kid, that's been developed here and is being used in our schools for carpooling, which is really, and I think that those can be really incredibly, will very much help our transportation system and our transit system and our roadways. And just finally, I'd just like to say I will still be looking forward to, and I haven't quite put it here yet, but bringing forward to the county commission in our budgeting proposal for some type of support for more frequency on some routes that we don't have here now, and as we move forward even in this year.
Ms. Melinda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to very quickly comment on Councilmember Donohue's remarks and really second them and kind of add that, I think as long as we continue to procure great consultants like Tyndale Oliver, and I'm sure Kimberly Horn as well. We haven't seen Mr. Eddings' presentation yet, but we can justify decisions we make with facts, and I think that the data that they put together is incredible, and I just wanted to note that. So,
very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And prior to wrapping the presentation, there's two more slides. To Commissioner Kim's point about looking at the expresses, etc. And Marco, I'm wondering. All right, Marco, take it away.
You want me to handle?
Yes, please.
So just to put kind of an exclamation point to a couple of things that were brought up in the COA TDP presentation, and you'll see them on the slide here. You heard in the budget presentation that we have the budget deficit reduced to about $6 million. We talked about that this proposed network saves between 2.5 and 5 million, and also preparing for the potential decrease in ad valorem in FY19. It is important for us to be realistic and look at how we would actually be implementing some of the proposed additions in this proposed network. So one of the things that we wanted to share with you are some of the service additions in this proposed network that could be delayed in order to ensure that in FY18 we can meet and work within the constraints that we have from a budget perspective. So you'll see that some of the services that we've looked at as potentially delaying in FY18 but implementing in the TDP in FY19 or FY20 are the limited express that would go hourly from Brandon to MTC to the airport to Northwest Transit Center. The frequency improvements on the Route 12 from 20 minutes to 15 minutes on weekdays. The limited express from Brandon to MTC to the airport in Northwest on weekends. And then the express service all day, hourly, that would go from the university area to Marion Transit Center and TIA that's been referenced today as well. So these are some of the services. Additionally, we will continue to look at some of the other things, like potentially if we did nothing to the Route 1 and left it at 20 minutes, that could have some implications. But it is important for the public to know, as we're going out to talk to them about this proposed network, that it's not locked in. It's important that we're continuing to look at what makes the most sense, and importantly, how we phase in and implement some of these changes is something that's on the table and that will be important as we're going forward.
And our first slide, our first bullet point should read hourly from the university area to MTC, correct? Thank you.
That is the Brandon.
Brandon to MTC. Okay. All right. Bottom one was UATC, yeah. Correct? Thank you.
And you see here on the map where those actual services in yellow where they are and how they would be affected.
Okay, thank you, sir. Bus rapid transit on the budget.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Clarence with Kinley Horn. I was obviously asked by the board to present on bus rapid transit. I think that I'll go through this presentation rather succinctly. I won't dwell on the slides, but I think it's a good point of where having a presentation, because bus rapid transit is one of the elements, one of the quivers in the bow. What I want to say is there aren't any silver bullets, no matter what type of mode and technology you're talking about. But I think it's important to think about bus rapid transit as one of the options. Just give you a little bit of context, and I too am very interested in technology, in mobility solutions. Just to let you know, I'm actually the chair of the advisory board for the Innovation Place, i.e. Tampa Innovation Alliance. So we've been completing a mobility plan that really does incorporate all these different modes. And I can tell you that autonomous vehicles, AV/CV transit, is coming. Whether or not we know exactly where it's going to land, we know that we have to accommodate it. But what I want to do today is really sort of focus on one element of mobility when technology is bus rapid transit. Because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to have a technology or mode that serves the most number of people, provides real quick service, and that is really desirable in terms of the network that essentially Joel described earlier. And BRT, real quickly, is that it is rapid, it is high quality, it's something that you really want to ride. And oftentimes in communities, it's part of an overall service, and we equate it to rail-like service. It's not rail service, but it has a frequency, reliability, and the capacity that really operates along major corridors. Oftentimes, especially in our economic environment, we do need to look at if we were to seek funding, i.e. federal funding and state, what BRT really means. It is really having a service that is operating on a guideway or a light guideway. So you know that the service is coming, it's every 15 minutes or every 10 minutes, and you walk out the door, you don't have to work to figure out whether or not it's going to be there on time. It operates rapidly, it has great branded stations, there's signal priority to allow it to move through the network a lot faster and be competitive to the automobile. And it does operate throughout the week as well as on weekends. One of the things in terms of BRT is really important is that there is this expectation of quality. And whether or not it looks exactly like what you see on the screen, there is a real big range. And that's really what I want to focus on as you start looking through these slides, is that there is an expensive version and there is a lower cost version. And I've worked around the country and around the state where the demand is really there for the service, and really what we're trying to provide is that travel time savings, at the bottom line with high quality service. As part of the BRT, there are certain elements that go into BRT. Technology is an important piece of it, being able to have on-time information, your next bus, having a real responsive system. And as you start seeing some of these images, oftentimes you do see a guideway because that does help ensure the on-time performance. But again, like I mentioned, we're all on a budget. So how do we get this done? And I've been working in other communities in the state and elsewhere. And one of the things that you'll see is that whether it's a mature community, like this is Montgomery County where I used to live before coming to Florida 11 years ago, where you have an extensive rail service, you have extensive bus network, but really what they're trying to do in these major corridors, and this is not too dissimilar to what we have in Hillsborough County, is they've come back in and they're retrofitting. They're actually putting a bus rapid transit in because that demand of service is there. Those centers, that population is really asking for frequent service, and they may not be located at a rail station. Miami, another place where we're working, we did quite a few projects. They actually have an entire program out right now. Obviously, they need additional funding for it, for the SMART plan. So they've identified some major corridors. And again, it's a larger system than we have. It's the 14th largest in the country. But there are corridors that really are demanding that service. And again, oftentimes it's those who are everybody from transit dependent to the folks who really need to get to work on time. And like here, they spend an hour to 2 hours sometimes riding the bus. So a busway is they started that program a long time ago. Where going to South County, they provided a corridor where they provided rapid bus service. But as I start walking through these elements, you're going to start seeing some additional images of what we can do or what some solutions are. This is in New York, where you're seeing now in congested areas where there are dedicated bus lanes. Why? Yes, it takes away a lane for automobiles, but the throughput, the capacity of rapid bus with higher capacity buses, whether they're longer vehicles, articulated, running frequently, they'll move more people through that corridor so that it'll address that congestion and really help on the economic development perspective. Again, it doesn't have to be everywhere. In Orlando and iDrive, we actually did this recently, which is, and this is a county and city road, so we put a bus business access and transit lane in there. So it's a dedicated bus lane that allows the bus to move through areas of congestion, again, provides a higher reliability. Other elements that to consider, transit system priority. One thing that technology can do for us is help improve everybody's travel. Transit system priority allows the bus to get priority, especially if they're running late, and it may be held when they're behind. But what it does, it actually helps throughput for all automobiles. So there's an ancillary benefit to that. And there are examples. So this is just not a bunch of great ideas that were wishful thinking. But I lived in Los Angeles in the 90s, where it was a place where you had to have a car. Otherwise, you were transit dependent. You fast forward where we are today, they have an extensive bus network with bus rapid transit on the major corridors, Wilshire, Santa Monica, Hollywood. So all these major corridors are really providing that service. And as you can tell, they're nicer buses, but they're still buses. They do carry a lot of capacity. Some other elements that we consider, and again, you're looking at existing retrofit of a corridor. We're modeling a queue jump. So let me back up for a second. So what happens is that where the bus typically is stuck in traffic, it actually gets to jump the queue. So you're not running behind all the traffic, and it allows you to be able to get some travel time savings. And it's something that we've been working with the Florida Department of Transportation. So we actually did a pilot project, so they're looking at implementing this hopefully more extensively. And this is actual on State Road 7 in Broward County, where we tested a queue jump which worked without a hitch. So again, these are some low-cost options. Yes, there are some elements that we have to take in consideration in terms of the communication infrastructure, but relatively, in terms of cost, it's actually a lower cost. As we start thinking through other components of BRT, Branding and stations are important so that you know that you're riding a service. You know that the type of service that you're riding. This is obviously a more expensive version. This is, these shelters are heated and cooled. Again, a lot more extensive infrastructure. This is the Cleveland Health Line, which was actually sponsored by the Cleveland Clinic, which again, so you see the lighting, the stations, it's really a premium service, so it's not your just run-of-the-mill service. And what you do want to do is you don't want to have stations that are so spaced closely that you're not going to get those travel time savings. So this is where it denotes a real grand station. You know that you walk up to it. You might, as Joe mentioned, you may have to walk a few blocks further, but you know that service is going to be premium. Here's another project I worked in Richmond. This is actually being implemented as we speak. Started on this project about 7 years ago in Richmond, where, again, not too dissimilar, where there are segments that are suburban. It goes through a historic center as well as a downtown, and it really changes between having a dedicated guideway or running curbside. So again, you can vary it. It's not a sort of model. You just have to shrink wrap around it. I think we've talked about this through the previous presentations. I won't touch on it too much more, but on time, bus information is really critical to bus rapid transit. And again, here's an example in Los Angeles of a stop that is both local and BRT. So that 794 is more the rapid service, and so again, it allows for that service to happen. We have Metro Rapid, which is really more of a rapid bus. I think there are some components that could be enhanced in terms of, to, again, make it more rapid, but I won't get into that right now. But I think that what I do want to do in terms of closing is that there are some simple things that we can do. Look at transit priority. Think about where there are opportunities for having a dedicated lane, and it could be during the peak period or preferably throughout the day, and that really helps. Obviously, the stops can be, you can use the existing infrastructure in terms of buses as well as stations, but again, that's sort of on the low end of the cost spectrum. And then lastly, a couple of slides just sort of summarizing that these components are really, oftentimes we're retrofitting in the urban environment. Really, we're trying to, again, serve where the population wants to be served so that they do have options. And so it does require someone's going back in, fitting in within the existing right-of-way, identifying stop locations and treatments, identifying how you can create more specific, identifiable stations as part of the overall strategy. So again, I've run through this presentation rather quickly, knowing that you're behind schedule, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now move to the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Murray, second by Mr. Jacob to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion's adopted. Action items. We have to take votes on these, correct?
Yes.
The first one is Resolution R 2017-0625, approval of the amendment to, well, we know this.
Move approval.
You have a presentation on this?
One day, sir. Just here to answer any questions.
Okay. Motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Commissioner Merlin to approve item 3A. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion adopted. Resolution 2017-0625. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, Chief Operating Officer HART. And staff is just asking for the board to consider and approve for the public outreach to go ahead and look at the proposed transformative network for the service changes identified through the COA. The date has been set for the final public hearing for July 26th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. in this office. There are a number of public outreach dates that are scheduled and will be disseminated to this board this week.
Any discussion on that? Mr. Melinda?
Oh, just one question. Is this part of the original scope, or is this a change order in context there?
This is actually the staff work that we do prior to every schedule change. So it does include the meetings that Tim Oliver was going to have wrapped up for the resolution of the TDP, but there's not a modification of the contract.
Okay. Thank you.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Mr. Roach to approve item 3B. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Chair's report. I don't have anything at this point in time. Chief Executive Office report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving quickly, we are installing the hardware for the next stage of our Flamingo Regional Fair project and our electronic fairs. So you will have seen items about this in the CEO Weekly. We are on schedule to get that implemented fully throughout our region by the early part of next year. So look for that next time you're on the bus. It's just exciting to see this is coming together. We have also included in the CEO Weeklies made an investment to improve our restrooms out at MTC. These are open to the public. We only close them when the building is not in use. And they're actually really nice facilities. We've upgraded them. This is where a lot of folks will see us when they come in on Red Coach and Megabus. And with the revisions to the TDP with less service running through downtown, we will have more passenger traffic there. And they are nice facilities. You can see that information in the weeklies. Two other items. One, we do always note our on-time performance in the weekly. In bus, we're averaging about 85%. That's right at our goal. We can make improvements from there. But in our industry, we usually say that 85% of the time if a schedule is accurate, you're good. And your own schedules, you're very much like that. We are extremely proud of our paratransit schedules where we are picking folks up in that 85% on-time window, but over 98% of the time we are on time to drop you off. Now, clearly, if you're waiting for a van, you want to be picked up then, but if you need to be at work at 8 and we're 98% of the time accurate there, that's better than most of us will ever hit in our personal schedules. And I cannot say enough stuff about the work that Greg Bracken's team has done, and also our ever stalwart scheduler, William Ozal, of taking on additional challenges. So thank you for rising to this challenge. We looked at the numbers we had and said around the industry 90% on-time arrival was great, but that meant one time every 2 weeks we made you late going to or coming from work. That was not acceptable. So I'm very proud of our team for stepping up and making life better for everyone. Back in March, we had a conversation with folks from TransPro about revising the goals, the mission, and the vision, which would be coming to this board. You will see this again in our August presentations for the board meeting for our budget, and then finalized introduction for a scorecard in September to support those goals, the vision, the mission, the overall TDP. So a lot of work bringing everything together. But fiscal 18 is going to be a really great year for us. And then speaking more broadly, you should have been polled by Lena for a joint meeting with our friends at PSTA. As you recall, we do have a memo of understanding to do work together. And one of the first things we're looking at is supporting their procurement department. Their procurement director has recently resigned. And the two CEOs, myself and Brad Miller, are going to do a test drive. Is Al Burns here? So you're only going to see half of Al physically because we're sharing a procurement team. We're going to see how this goes for 90 days. Then we have the opportunity to extend that, but this is an actual business unification. Al and his team are killers, so I kind of pity the folks at Pinellas who have to get used to working with them. And they're very thorough, and this would be a nice way to show that we're doing business together, making better decisions with our tax dollars because we would have one person instead of two in the region, and see how it goes, and I think a nice testament to doing business together. And that is all that I have, sir.
Okay. Mr. Smith, General Counsel report?
No, sir.
Okay. We have the copies of the HART Board Committee reports and reports from HART Board representatives, status reports. Now moving to public comment. Each person has 3 minutes to address the board. The first person is David Jones. Welcome, sir.
Hello. I came today to talk about the changes in the bus system, but I've since learned that by coming here that the public comment meetings are probably where I better should make those comments, which I will attend those meetings and do so. I just wanted to mention I arrived before a bus. The 4 bus is scheduled for elimination. I'd like you to consider that, not to eliminate that. Yeah, I realize you got to run an efficient operation. I'd like the South Tampa Flex bus system to become more expansive, and that can maybe work in the area of what the 4 buses eliminating, the flex system can pick up on. That would make me a happy rider. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next is A.J. Kaiser.
Thank you. My name is A.J. Kaiser. I'm 80 years old, poor health, and etc. I wish I wasn't here, but I have a problem and I want Gerald's help with. It's with HART. in July 2015, had an accident. One of your buses hit me. I can't get nowhere with your claims department to settle resolve this because I said, I know you got cameras all over the vehicles. I said, look at them and you'll tell you who was at fault. We don't have to, and we're not going to show you anything. I don't want to get into pursuing, the only way that I know at this point is to file some kind of court action to get, to subpoena these records and things, then go to court over, the camera, should I say. So I don't want to get into. I think in this case, your claims department being unethical, maybe even criminal, and I could explain that at the right time or whenever. But I don't want to get into having to file charges against people for criminal conspiracy and stuff like this to get something like this taken care of. So I'm asking you all if you all will review, look at the videos, and determine at that point.
Ms. Egan?
Sir, our director of legal services is right behind you, Sylvia Berrien, and she's going to stand up and talk to you right now. Okay. And we'll get an update to the board this week. Thank you.
I can talk with you outside.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is a junior high school classmate of mine, Linda Stringer.
Can you get
we answer questions?
Sing like a canary.
And may I add, former chair of this particular board for almost 3 years back in the 80s. The American Transit Street was done under my tenure.
Thank you.
As he said, I'm Lillian Stringer, Director of Public Relations for the Tampa Housing Authority. The Cypress service route is up for elimination, and if implemented, would place considerable hardships on the participants seeking to visit our offices to handle their businesses. This group includes service to our veterans, elderly and disabled residents, and participants as well. There are more than 8,500 participants on this program, and a great many of them rely on HART as their only means of transportation. As you may or may not know, demolition of our North Boulevard community in West Tampa is scheduled for later this month, and it reduces your ridership by more than 2,000 to 3,000 participants. I don't know if this was a catalyst for your decision to terminate this location, but consideration should be given to the fact that replacing this public housing community is going to be the West River development, which will bring back more than 40 acres of affordable housing, apartments, mixed-use apartments, market rate, and home ownership opportunities, retail, and other businesses as well. So I really, with this addition, it would more than likely triple the number of riderships that you have now. We ask for your consideration regarding bringing back services to this community. I'm glad to see that a public meeting is scheduled, and we will certainly be in attendance. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Ms. Stringer, I'm going to volunteer our Director of Government and Community Relations, Marco Sandusky, to speak with you now to get a little more information and make sure we're keeping everybody covered to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stringer. I have no other names for the public comment, so we'll move on to old business. And then old business that need to come before today. Moving into new business, Mr. Roach has a presentation. This agenda was publicized to the public, I think, last week, and it was not on there. So I think to do the right thing is to ask if they have any objections to Mr. Roach's presentation. Any objection to it? Seeing none.
Just one request. If I have to leave a little bit early today, can I get copies of?
Yeah, I think Lena has the copies, and really it was more just to do a quick comment. It shouldn't take long at all, but
yes,
and I missed seeing the homestead exemption in the new business. So thank you for allowing me to add on to that. But when I got a copy of the presentation on Friday, and actually I have a few extras if anyone in the audience needs a copy. When I got the presentation, I was very glad. The first thing I do when I see data is I like to see a graph and see what it looks like. So the first thing that I do when I see data is I graph it so I can get an idea, how is this in relation to everything else that we've been doing. So that's what I'm sharing with you today, because we learned, I think, at our May board meeting of the homestead exemption proposal, and then a few days later after our May meeting it actually was passed. And assuming the governor signs this will be on the ballot. So this will be something that we will.
He already signed it.
You already signed it? Okay, there you go. Thank you for that. So the first, if everyone has a copy of it, what I did is I took on the page 1 where it says historic ad valorem millage. I took 2013 to 2018 in red. That's the red rectangle, and that is what you see plotted on the graph at the top. And then I took the projections based on, assuming that this passes, what would our projected ad valorem revenue look like? And that's what you see on the top of the first page is that plot. So, while we were concerned that I think it was mentioned in that meeting that we might, and it was the back of the napkin, I understand, that we would get in the first year a $4.5 million cut. Really, you can see that our property tax actually goes up each year, and in some instances it looks like at an even higher rate than we have seen historical. So going to page 2, then what I did is I looked at the percentage change each year. So again, the red bars that you see, 2013, we had a reduction in 2013, and then as the housing bubble changed, then our valuations, our property tax revenue started increasing, and it increased 5.16% since 2012 as we started to rebound. And with these homestead exemption, if that does pass, that's what you see in blue, our rate of increase actually goes up even with this. So I don't know that we necessarily are going to see, I don't think it will, according to this, we will have no cuts. There is no cuts if that exemption passes. And then on the third slide, I just wanted to compare what the ad valorem would look like with the cut. That's the bar at the bottom, and you have the bar chart with the blue, the red, and the yellow at the bottom. The blue is with the homestead exemption. The red is if the homestead exemption did not fail, and that's 2019 starting in that year. So you can see the difference between the red and the blue. It's not as major as we had thought. So what happens is it slows very slightly the reduction of increase, but it's still projected to increase over 7%, which is more than we've historically seen in the short term. Now, what is the yellow bar? Well, the yellow bar is what we had in our TDP, what our projections were of property tax in September of 2015, just a year and a half ago. So if you see, that blue bar is actually a very welcome change in what we were projecting just a year and a half ago. Now, this again is assuming that these estimates are correct, and we know they're probably not going to be. In 2 or 3 years, we're going to have a different picture. But I don't want us to, be as concerned about this exemption when I think what we need to look at, again, is we are experiencing right now that paradigm shift in transportation. So the last slide on the last page is a percentage difference of where our ridership has been, and that's the blue trend. And you can see in FY13, sorry, it's kind of jumbled up, but we were at a 2.8% increase in rider year over year from 2012 to 2013. And going through the out years, this is actual data. You can see that our ridership is trending down year over year. And that's an inverse relationship to the property or housing property taxes going up. So as the economy gets better, we see rises in home ownership. People, and especially coupled with the gas price of gas going down, you're going to see ridership, is harder to get, and that's kind of what we're experiencing. I didn't put an asterisk there, but FY17 is minus 7.3. That, obviously, we haven't finished FY17. That's in your board packet. That's year-to-date ridership. So right now, currently, for our fiscal year, we're down 7.3%. So that's what I wanted to do because we were talking about it at the last meeting. We spent about 5 to 10 minutes. But now seeing the data and the projections, I think it's not as dire of a situation as we might have thought when we first heard about it.
Any questions? Mr.
And where's this data from?
I actually got it from the presentation that was sent out on Friday.
If you'll take the next presentation on your surface, it's three slides titled Homestead Exemption and Millage, and this was transmitted last week. Jeff's office had prepared this.
Okay.
The second of the three slides, I suppose, is what we have historically recouped, and we have budgeted versus anticipated ad valorem revenue. The final slide is an adjustment on projected revenues using what's projected by the state on growth, and Cindy's standing there and knows this better than I do, and it backed out an impact for the ad valorem modification.
Right. The source of the revenue, the estimating that we have here is from the State Revenue Estimating Conference. We get those projected values from that database. They project out at least 5 years. And the impact is the Florida Association of Communities is estimating, at least for FY18, a 4% decrease. So when you look at the increase in the property values netted out by the decrease as a result of the increased tax exemption, then that's where you're getting the net ad valorem value. And while Director DeRoche is correct in that the impact is that we will still be getting more revenue, it's less than we could get if there was no exemption by, you can see over the course of, if I have the presentation, over the course of those 6 years, the impact is almost $13 million less than what we could get without the exemption.
I had an agenda to discuss homestead exemption and to discuss millage, and I did not know that Commissioner DeRoche was going to do this, but do understand that less than half of, I think, our budget is ad valorem. We also depend on grants, which we all know is drying up, and we're looking at a deficit at this particular point in time, which we all think, I think, is going to grow. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm I don't want to say the dark horse in the room. I am of thinking that we're going to have some serious problems out there. And I thought that we needed to have a discussion on millage. There had been some rumors floating, but I was trying to have a backdoor approach to how we would look at millage and if the possibility we need to increase millage. I would never have done that. So at this point, I thought I would bring the conversation to this board to have an open discussion as to where your thought process is, if you had an appetite to discuss an increase in millage, because our budget we're still $6 million in the hole. And if we're even looking at this aspect here, and I heard that we shouldn't have any doom and gloom, but on the homestead exemption, Commissioner Merman is in Tallahassee, I've been in Tallahassee, that revenue estimating conference one day will say we're doing great, and a couple hours later it tells you we're in trouble. So at this particular point in time, I think that we need to look at where we are and what this effect this could be on HART. We're doing it at the county. We're doing it at every other aspect of entities, governmental agencies that looks at millage. We have not had an increase in millage since fiscal year 2012. And we're also sitting here saying that we're cutting some services. We're not cutting some services. We're shifting some services, but this county continues to grow. We've heard Commissioner Merman talk constantly about South County, what happens down there, other parts of this county that we need to have our services rendered to. And we as a board, it's our responsibility to make sure that we get those services to the public. Riderships may be down at this particular point in time, but we all know as the economy changes and gas prices start to go up, our ridership will start to go up. And this county is growing at 32,000 to 35,000 people a year. So it's our responsibility to look at that. So I wanted to since you brought this up, I want to have an open discussion as to what your feelings are and looking at the millage. Since 2012, we've been at 0.05. And we need to think about what happens to this agency as we move along. So I want to open it up. I didn't want to have a backdoor approach. I want to open it up. So Commissioner Merman, I saw your hand in the Commissioner here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you always give a lot of great thought to, issues that come before us. And I guess where I can't say where I would be or not be, because I would like to see a financial analysis of, what would be entailed with increase in millage, or status quo. I think that's what we need to see in front of us. I do want to make this comment, though. Listen, Director Jarosh, I really do appreciate your thought that went into that, but honestly, if we're just here to accept the status quo and stay where we're at, then that's great. I'm not. We have a lot of people that don't want to be dependent on their cars, and we need to increase our ridership, increase our routes, and increase opportunities for people to get to their jobs on time and have access. And right now, as hard as our staff is working, we are not there. We know we're not there. And so I always knew our decrease would be about between 1 million and 1.5. So I already knew that. I knew it would be a little bit of a ding in the increase in the ad valorem that we get every year. Yes, our ad valorem is going to continue to increase, but we had 56,000 new people move to our county last year. Who knows how many this year? How are we going to respond to that? And that's where this HART board needs to focus their vision. Tyndale did a great job of getting us to focus on our vision of where we need to be. But we have a long, long way to go. And we are transforming our service delivery completely. And the TDP that was presented to us today is the foundation for that transformation. But I'm not accepting the status quo. I refuse to, because I serve South County, and I know Waterset is as big as Fishhawk, and those people are completely dependent on cars. We can't accept that as that's status quo. If we accept that, I'm not willing to accept that for them. I want them to be able to have access to good jobs, good paying jobs, and use public transportation to get there. So thank you for allowing me, but I would like to see a fiscal analysis.
Commissioner Kemp, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for raising this point. I can appreciate your charts, Director Jarosh, but I also concur most wholeheartedly with Commissioner Merman's comments with this proposal to bring forward some kind of increase in millage. As I've stated before, we are, and it's not a surprise to anybody here, we're the most underfunded transit system in the nation. It's one of the reasons we do lose ridership. In Houston and Seattle, where they're increasing frequencies and they've done this kind of transformation of their system, they're the two systems in the country right now that have been increasing ridership. I happen to think from reading a lot of this around the country that some of this ridership is being taken by Uber and Lyft. And not that that's a bad thing, that's fine for the short trips that they can make in a way that they had not been able to make before. But it is absolutely crushing us and strangling this area that we do. We have a transit system that, because it is so incredibly underfunded, to even think about taking a 1.7 million or 1.5 million cut in our future when we are so desperately underfunded. We are desperate. And I had also noticed Ms. Stringer brought up about us not serving the Social Security Administration, the Housing Authority area. I mean, there's a lot of places that we're not doing it. And even with this transformation, it's very sad that we have so few routes that have so little frequency. We have to do something. We are, by the way, in many states, the states fund at least partially a transit system. We don't have that in Florida. I mean, we have grants or temporary things, but not on a regular basis operational support. In the state of Florida, there's only 2 counties that are relying totally on the ad valorem for their local support for their transit agency, and that's Pinellas and us. And we're the 2 most underfunded, not only in the state per our capita, but around the country. And as I stated before, even Pinellas, they have a 3/4 meal for theirs. They have $66 per capita. They're 1/3 our size and much more dense. So they're able to do something with their dollars. We are even so, it's shameful even by standards of Pinellas. We're at $55 per capita at half meal. We certainly need to do something. This is critical. And I appreciate you bringing this up. I'll be there to support anything we can do to bring more resources to our transit system. We should not settle for this. One thing, and this is not even something we've discussed, but as I was driving around this weekend, I was cringing at what our bus stops, our stops look like. How insufficient they are for knowing that people have to wait there for a half hour, an hour. I think we desperately have to do something, and I'll support any and all measures we can do to move forward. And then once we get the dollars, to do them in the most efficient, best, effective service we can, because we are at a critical state.
Anyone else? Mr. Powers, Reverend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of this board, looking at this organization over a period of time, I believe that we need to do something that we can serve the people. We are a service organization, and this agency, the staff have done over the years, I think, a magnificent job in trying to cut wherever they can. And we look at the reports today, we are now looking at cutting routes and redirecting our system to go into the grid system, which is going to affect some of the local routes, and it's going to hurt some of the people that need the system most. I do know that we're hemorrhaging for money, and whatever is necessary that we need to do to support this agency financially, I think we're going to take a long look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Yes, I don't want to step into policy discussion, but one of the things I want to make sure we put it in context, as you probably realize, our charter limits you to 0.5 mils. In order for us to change that, and I understand there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done before the policy decision is made, but in order to change that, it's going to go in front of the county commission, it's going to go in front of the city council, it's going to go in front of Tampa Terrace City Council, because the charter is a composite of those three agencies, and we may even need a referendum. I haven't looked at that issue yet, but I think we need to at least determine what you need to do if you're going to do that, because the policy decision is going to be a difficult one as it is.
I have asked you, and I've talked to county attorneys of the process of that, and it is that if we get to the point that we're looking at raising the millage, it has to start off with this board. This board has to pass it first. And then from there it goes to county commission, Tampa City Council, Tampa Terrace City Council. And I think it then comes back to us to determine if it goes, or maybe back to the county commission to determine if it goes to the ballot. Because we're not asking to raise millage, we'll be asking the public to raise millage. Is that ever mindful? This is not one of those things with Go Hillsborough where people are saying, well, if I vote for Go Hillsborough, I want to raise taxes. Anyway, if it happens, this board would have to approve it. Then it goes to the county commission, Tampa City Council, Tampa Terrace City Council. I think it goes back to this board, and then I think it goes back to the county commission, because the county commission is the only one that can put it on the ballot, and it would have to go on the ballot for whatever year we put it on there. So you're absolutely right. That's where it goes. Mr. Melendez, that's all you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I apologize if I have to leave after I comment, but I just wanted to add that today, and I appreciate you opening up the discussion. As of today, I really there's so many factors on the table that I wouldn't be prepared to entertain the idea, as it stands today. I completely appreciate the comments and that we are in need, and hemorrhaging was one of the words, Mr. Bowers, respectfully, I can't deny our need. However, we had a great presentation today on where we could be if we modify our service. We know we have to change the way we do business. There's so many other factors. I just, and we have the capital side of the TDP of Tennell Oliver's presentation. I would like to see more information about that. I'm not saying it's off the table for me, but I just wanted to let you know that I would be inclined to see a lot more information. And I think Mr. Roche provided some compelling information as well that I'd like to digest. Thank you.
Chair.
Mr. Suarez, Councilman Suarez.
Because of the amount of information that we're going to need to look at as a body, I would suggest, and I'm not sure of the process, Mr. Smith, in terms of having a special meeting specifically to discuss our millage and what we're going to do going forward. If that is a proper forum, I would suggest or make a motion that we have a special meeting specifically to talk about some of these issues. And I think that part of the problem that we have going forward, and I know that you've met with Bonnie Wise and all the folks that are in your finance department at the county. I know that I've met with Ms. Little in the city. There may be a recession coming. There may be some other issues that are going to hit us. Making a decision as large as this, we need to figure out what the impact is going to be, whether or not we continue to do just ad valorem revenue or something else. I think that we do need to have that discussion. So, Mr. Smith, what is the process for having a special meeting to talk about this?
I do know, just to give you more context, that the county attorney's office is currently looking at this process because the county is so instrumental in that process. What I would propose to do, now I haven't done this yet, is get a hold of Chip and whoever he's working with on this, and we'll go over that process and provide a summary to this board so you will know exactly what you can and cannot do, or what would be the recommended or preferred way.
I'm trying to distill it down to a little bit of a simpler thing, Mr. Smith, is just that to have a special meeting just of us to discuss this one issue. I mean, we can call for a meeting, I assume.
Yes,
I know that in our charter it's a special call meeting. I don't know if we have that same provision in our charter here, but I'd like to maybe call for that, and then we can have a discussion that is completely devoid of any other issues other than this.
Yes, you can have a special meeting, correct.
Okay, terrific. And we may want to ask staff to take a look at the date that we can look at. I know that with the summer coming up, there's a lot of travel schedules. People are going to be gone for a while. We may want to look at it in late July or late June. I don't know, but we'll have to figure that out and then move forward, because I think that it's too important. Mr. Roche made some points with her information, but we still need to make sure we distill a lot of this information based on what we can get from other folks too, and have a discussion. And I think it's important enough that we should.
Well, I'm going to ask staff to look at some dates, probably the latter part of July, get people our first part of August of having a meeting where we just will have nothing on the agenda but this.
Yeah.
And at that same meeting, I think we should have something along the lines of financial presentation of what we're looking at. Also in that presentation, I think we need to look at what would be the impact if we did suggest having a half millage, what it would do for this agency. I think that's something that we need to put forth out there also. I appreciate your information that you're giving us. Yes, ma'am.
Quickly. I honestly did not know that that you had the millage increase. My purpose of this presentation was to go at the notion of the homestead exemption, but I am glad I did it now because I too really need to see a lot more information, and maybe that's what this meeting will bring. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Commissioner Murray, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the conversation today. I think we have to be very mindful of the. I mean, there's a political side of this. I mean, I just have to put it out there. We're talking about gas tax at the county commission. We're talking. I mean, we may. And I'm still in favor of it, and I'd love to dedicate some of that money to HART. We can't talk to each other, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd get them in a room. And then we've got this premium transit feasibility plan that's going to be done a year from this summer. And that's probably going to have a recommendation for, we're going to need a dedicated source of revenue, new revenue to go towards this. And a lot of it's going to be stuff that HART will have control over, bus rapid transit, those type of things. So I'm just saying that it's not that. I think we have to figure out. You can't. You got to go to the voters with your best shot, and we got to also be mindful of that if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, okay. Commissioner Kemp, service enhancement request.
That was just a point that I kind of made earlier about the fact that I do want to look at the county commission in terms of us talking about a budget. In the other counties in Florida, where they don't rely exclusively or don't have actually an ad valorem tax, they do get their support for their entire agency, or from the general stream of support general revenue comes from the countywide funds of those counties. So anyway, I will be asking our county commission to support some services I haven't looked at yet in our budget this year, moving forward to provide additional support for her.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we adjourn. Thank you.